Hey guys, for those that are new to shooting with cameras, we want to go over the 3 main camera settings so that you have a basic understanding of how they work. These 3 settings are aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. Understanding these 3 settings and how they can affect your photos is extremely important, so make sure to pay close attention as we go over each of these camera settings. Also, we encourage you to seek out additional resources on this topic to get an even better understanding. This might be one topic that you'll need to watch multiple videos on before it makes perfect sense. Let's start with ISO. ISO is the sensitivity of your camera sensor to light. It's one of the ways to brighten or darken your images. However, ISO can also affect the overall quality of your photos. Have you ever taken a photo with your phone at night or in a dark room and noticed that the image looked very grainy or low quality? When your camera took that picture, it noticed that there wasn't a lot of light available, so it needed to compensate to produce an image that you could actually see. The camera does this by raising the ISO. Now the downside is the higher the ISO setting is, the more grainy or noise might be seen in your image. A cheaper camera may only be able to go up to 800 or 1600 ISO before becoming grainy, while a more expensive camera can go up to 10,000 or even 25,000 ISO and still produce a usable image. Here's a quick example using 3 different cameras. We're going to be using a Sony a7 III as our high-end camera, a Canon 70D as our beginner camera, and an iPhone 12 Pro. These photos were all taken at the same ISO setting. As you can see, the picture was taken in a low light setting, and I'm sure you can already tell which camera is which, but I'll give you a few seconds before showing the results. Well, alright, here are the results. Did you guess correctly? Typically, the more expensive the camera, the less noise and better quality. It's also important to know that the sensor and pixel size does have an impact on noise, and this is why the high-end camera usually has bigger sensors and performs better in low light, because more light can hit the bigger sensor. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to go out and buy the most expensive camera. As a real estate photographer, most of the shots you will do will be during the daytime or around sunset, so you won't have to worry about using super high ISO settings very often. So simply put, the higher the ISO number, the higher the likelihood of having grain introduced into your image, especially in the shadows. The lower the ISO number, the less likely you'll see grain in your pictures. When you're shooting outside in the daytime, you typically want to shoot at the lowest ISO setting since there is already so much light. For the cameras that we use, that ISO is 100. For interior shots, we still keep it relatively low between 100 and 400 ISO, depending on the amount of light coming into the room. Alright, let's move on to aperture. Aperture refers to the size of the opening of your lens. When adjusting aperture, the blades in the lens open and close to let more or less light in. Typically, these are written in f-stops. The higher the f-stop, the more closed the aperture blades are and the less light coming in. The lower the f-stop, the more open the aperture blades are and more light's coming into the camera hitting your sensor. A low f-stop means more depth of field, which blurs the background of a picture. A high f-stop means less depth of field and the more of the image is in focus. For our real estate photography, we keep our aperture setting by default at f8. If you need your camera to shutter faster, you can reduce the f-stop at a lower setting like f6.3 or even f4, which will bring in more light into the camera sensor. I personally shoot at f4 a lot with my camera and lens combination, but the majority of our media specialists shoot at a higher f-stop setting. When shooting, remember to set the ISO based on the scene. To keep it simple, we leave our ISO settings on auto with a minimum setting of 100 and a maximum setting of 400. For real estate photography, use f8 to avoid any depth of field issues. If there is a mountain view in the distance, you may want to bump up your f-stop so more of the image is in focus. Finally, let's talk about shutter speed. The shutter speed is the amount of time measured in seconds that your camera shutter is open. With shutter speed, you'll see a number of 1/50, 1/100, 1/250, up to 1/8000 or beyond, depending on your camera. It is also possible to slow your shutter speed down to 1, 5, 10, or even 30 seconds. The slower the shutter speed, the more motion blur and flowy looking images. The faster the shutter speed, the less motion blur from moving objects like cars, sports, and people running. Once you understand these three concepts and how your camera uses them, you'll be able to take some excellent real estate photos in addition to being able to troubleshoot any issues that may arise. If you guys have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. We'll see you guys on the next one.